Good morning. Welcome to Orange Friday and my daily reflection. As we celebrate the 40th anniversary of our congregation this week, I'd like to close the week out with a look at some of the other pastors that have been here. Pastor T, as you know, retired in August of 1986, and after a short interim period, Pastor Stan Niemi accepted the call to become the second pastor of Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran in January of 1987. Pastor Stan had spent the previous 5 years in Papua New Guinea as a missionary, hiking in the bush, working with 3 pastors in a circuit, and then settling into the Papua New Guinea city itself with indigenous pastors and working with them. I wonder what the transition was like for he and his family, his wife Chris, his daughter Sarah, and son Brian, to move from New Guinea to Vacaville. And Pastor Stan served here until he started a new congregation called Lord of Life Lutheran in Elk Grove. I do wish I knew more about what took place during Pastor Stan's tenure here, and so I'm asking those of you who know what happened, those of you who were here and are listening to this reflection, to please pass that information along. I'd love to get some written materials so that we can first keep that legacy going and also fill in the history of Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran. After an 11-month interim with Pastor Ralph Moe, Pastor Eric Wobolt accepted the call to become the third pastor at Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. Pastor Eric moved from Advent Lutheran Church in Walnut Creek, Morgan Hill, to begin his tenure here. As I looked over the pictures of the Pastor Eric years, I noticed some changes to the worship space. It appears that there used to be brown paneling back here behind the altar area. That's obviously gone, and it was gone after a couple of years of pictures of Pastor Eric. Also, the rooms were built back there. The rooms that were started out apparently as storage rooms, although they were used for VBS classrooms, and you'll hear later another purpose for that middle room. They now are our sacristy, the old quilter's room, now really kind of a storeroom for stuff, and the middle room in the back is the VBS room, also called the Cindy Ward room. I heard rumors about that paneling coming down overnight, and some people were displeased with it. I gotta say, though, it really lightened up the appearance of our worship space, and I think that's good. Another momentous event that occurred during Pastor Eric's time here was the hiring of a young musician by the name of Chris Holmes. I love the story of how Chris was hired. As most of us know, Chris has been in bands for most of his life. I suspect from even like middle school on. And you should go to YouTube and put in there Laser Boy. You might be interested in seeing some of the videos that show up. That was one of Chris's bands. Well, in 1995, Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church was searching for an organist, and I expect that they were trying to experiment with a new kind of worship style as well. They had located an accomplished musician to fill that need, but unfortunately, he had to undergo some emergency and quick surgery and was unable to accept the call and position. He did recommend one of his good friends, a guy by the name of Chris. So Pastor Eric and a team went down to a bar that Chris played in like every week in Fairfield, the Muffin Tree or something like that. And during one of the intermissions between sets, Pastor Eric started interviewing Chris about how it was that he managed to get all of those musical sounds to come from his keyboard when all they ever saw was the keyboard and whatever the other musician was playing. Chris calmly apparently explained all of that, and at that point, it seems as if Pastor Eric offered Chris the job. Thank God Chris was smart enough to say yes. because for the last 25 years, we have come to enjoy not only his Sunday music accomplishments, but also the great music that he leads with the choir and the worship team. And of course, who can forget the incredible Chris and Friends concerts, or now the concerts by Rhythm Method 4. I need to share with you a story about Chris that I learned before I got here. It was during one of my Monday golf events with my buddy Chuck, who worked in the synod office. Now, Chuck knew that I was looking for another place to serve, and Shepherd of the Hills had become a conversation spot. So Chuck told me this story, and he said, "You'll like it." It seems that for one Sunday, Chuck was coming up here to preach and lead a workshop. As he arrived in the parking lot early and waited for, as he said, Pastor Al to show up and unlock the doors, this van rolled into the parking lot and parked in the corner. A weary, tired, bedraggled-looking person rolled out of that van and introduced himself as Chris, and I do the music here. Chuck thought, this is gonna be strange. He looks exhausted. And Chris, of course, as he has always wanted to do, shares much of his life. And he told Chuck that he and his band had been playing in Oregon the night before. When they finished, they packed the van. One of his bandmates drove all the way down here so that Chris could sleep in the van. So no wonder he looked tired, sleepy, bedraggled. And Chuck thought to himself, I don't know what the music is going to sound like. He better be okay. Chuck was blown away. He said to me, you will love working with Chris. He was right, and he still is right. I enjoy the ministry that Chris brings, and I am so thankful that Pastor Eric found him at the Muffin Tree Bar and brought him here. In August of 1988, Pastor Eric accepted the call to serve the people of Servant of Christ Lutheran Church in Champlin, Minnesota, and another interim period began. Pastor Jeff Irwin served the next 7 months as the congregation worked through the process of a new call. That call was answered by Pastor Al Schoonover, who started his service here in April of 1999. Pastor Al brought a new vision for the congregational leadership to the fore. This new vision saw the old church council style become our current steering team model. The desire then and still is to empower leaders and to streamline the process. Our steering team has been modified over the years as we see the need to emphasize different areas of ministry. The team concept was always the concept of hoping for collaboration and vibrancies, while the committee structure sometimes brought with it rigidity and status quo-like. It was also during Pastor Al's tenure that we made the decision to increase our footprint on this campus. Remember, the preschool has been growing. The Early Education Center has now become part of the preschool. Activities were happening all over the place. SHI, our senior high youth group, was meeting in a dark cave, that middle room back there. Oh, when I came here, I was just stunned. They had made it a great, wonderful place for themselves, but it had no windows, no natural light. I thought they would become fungi instead of shires. There was also an awful lot of work to be done in midweek during Lent when the preschool classroom in the big room had to be broken down, the adult tables and chairs brought out, set up for supper, and then broken down, and the preschool room set up again before we left, before the church was emptied on Wednesday night. And imagine also that was taking place for all of the other monthly meetings that took place during the course of the years. It was after a long discussion that the best plan was not to move, as some were hoping to, but rather to stay here. And a decision was made to seek out portable buildings. Well, I wish, in a sense, that Pastor Al had not left as early as he did in December of 2004, because he left before he got to see the completion, or at least the bringing in of those buildings that he had been so helpful and instrumental in working toward. But Pastor Al, as I said, left in December of 2004, probably moved out in January of 2005 to a new call at Hope Lutheran in Fresno. I'd like us to pause and give thanks to God for all of the pastors that have served here, Pastor T, Pastor Stan, Pastor Eric, Pastor Al, as well as the interims who have served Shepherd of the Hills in those years. Pastor Anker Jensen, he was the one between Pastor T and Pastor Stan. Pastor Mo, Pastor Jeff. Thanks be to God for all of you who have been here and had an impact on the ministry that we call Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. May God bless us as we move forward over the next 40 years. So, of course, this Sunday, we'll be celebrating the anniversary of worship. 40 years of proclaiming the gospel, singing God's praise, 40 years of so many things. So tune in on Sunday morning, or watch us on the YouTube later, and join us for the momentous day. Please also make sure you have your cupcake or birthday cake and candle ready. We'll blow out and sing. I look forward to seeing you in some fashion on Sunday. And until then, remember, wash your hands, stay home if you're feeling sick, be safe with one another, love one another, practice the important social distancing, and of course, as Sergeant Esterhaus dismisses us to go out our ministry and business, be safe out there.